Hey, I'm Rob Brooks of Rob Brooks Realty, and this is my friend Paul Womack. I'm also with Rob Brooks Realty. It turned out that we have matching shirts on today, and so I don't know how that happened, but it
completely orchestrated.
No, it wasn't. All right, so we are here on another segment of preparing your house for the hurricane. So we've talked about some things of what to do years or months or days in advance of the hurricane, and a little bit in writing out the storm. But Paul, what happens after the storm? You've had some things happen with you in coming back to some stuff. So just give a quick 2-minute version of what it was like when you came back.
Well, we were dramatically affected by Hurricane Ivan in September 16th of 2004. We evacuated. My wife and I left actually on September 15th. The storm came on the 16th. We came back on the 17th to a house that had about 2 feet of water in it, or had. And some of the things that I want to talk to, a lot of people don't know that you always hear this term, the area is declared a disaster area.
Right.
That's a very important term. When that happens, special rules and regulations kick in. Mm-hmm. And I can't stress strongly enough that you find someone that knows about these things. We were fortunate enough that we found a CPA to help us, and that doesn't mean, oh, you've got all the money in the world, you need a big CPA. You just need somebody that knows the rules when these things happen. And for example, if you're not covered by insurance or a grant of some kind, or if you don't get money for something that's damaged, rules are in place when an area is declared a disaster area that will help you with tax credits. So for easy numbers, let's say we had $200,000 worth of damage to our property that was not covered, again, by insurance or a grant or anything. And you make $25,000 a year. Well, when the disaster area rules kick into place, you're allowed to go back the previous 2 years. So let's say in 2004 was the storm. You can go back to 2002 and get the taxes that you paid from those previous 2 years, and then it's divided out evenly, and for as many years as it takes for you to make up that $200,000 worth of loss. So in that example, it would be 8 years total that you wouldn't pay taxes. And a lot of people didn't know that. And when things that are damaged that aren't insured, for example, this CPA friend of ours that told us this was trees, for example. We had several large pine trees in our yard. He knew, we called a forester. The guy was a certified arborist, worked for the U.S. Forest Service. He came out and took pictures and measured all of our trees that were damaged or broken, and then filled out a form, and we were able to get a tax credit for those trees, and it was substantial. In our case, it was $38,000 for damaged trees. And I thought, well, that seems like a large number, and his response was, well, you know, a pine tree that's 3 feet around, he said, think how much it would be to go to the nursery and purchase that tree.
Right, so it made sense that way. So having the right CPA, when that the disaster area is declared, those special rules go into effect, and you might financially recoup some of those losses that came from those things. So good thing to keep in mind. Let me ask about this.
While I'm thinking about it, I want to say one thing about that.
Yeah.
We didn't get a check for $38,000 or whatever.
Right.
We just didn't pay the taxes on that amount for those years. It's basically what that amounts. Nobody walked up and said, here's a big check. But it was substantial help that you weren't having to pay your federal taxes, state taxes, all that kind of stuff, until you recouped that money, until you made that money back. It was just
good point.
Your earnings were just tax-free.
Great. Okay, good. Yes. So, of course, we are not CPAs, but this is something that you need to look for when you're choosing your accountant so that you might be aware of some of that. And of course, that's something that can be done before the hurricane strikes. Let's go back to that day when you drove back into your subdivision. And so you saw a lot of devastation, but there's some safety precautions that need to be taken too when you're coming into an area that has been devastated by a hurricane. Tell us some safety precautions that might have to do with power lines or standing water or whatever.
Well, in all of those circumstances that Rob just mentioned, always assume that there is a big hole in the middle of standing water, because things have changed, trees have been uprooted. You don't know anymore. That road may have driven down 100 times, may be washed out and under that water. You don't know that.
Right.
When we came back to our home, we didn't have power for several weeks. And it was the middle of the night when we got back, and yes, there were down power lines, and always assume that a power line is energized, because there's no way to see it. Some of the bigger lines could be actually bouncing on the ground, and that would obviously indicate power, but some of them may not be, and all of those, you're standing on wet ground, and they can actually energize the ground and electrocute you from several feet away.
Right.
So down power lines, water, and animals. Animals have just been affected too. They're scared. And I'm not just talking dogs or cats. I mean, alligators in our area could be around,
Sure.
Snakes,
Yeah.
all those kind of things. So everybody's kind of been topsy-turvy. So just make sure, a couple things, that you have some kind of way to protect yourself, whether it's maybe a bear spray or arm yourself in some way, flashlights, and make sure somebody knows where you're going. If you're going back to check on a property that the area has been deemed off limits for a while, and you can go back in because you're a homeowner, make sure that someone who's not going there knows where you're going, just in case you fell and got hurt, because there's not the normal means of communication and ways to get you help.
Something that I think should be addressed too with all this, I mean, we've talked about being careful, we've talked about recouping money, but there is an emotional expense that happens to each person that goes back to a devastated area. And so you see devastation that may have happened to your home, to your friends' homes, your neighbors or whatever, and it's a sad several days or weeks of cleaning up, and there might feel like well, so much has been taken away. Maybe there's little hope on things. Where did you find hope and peace in that situation?
Well, one of the first things we found when we came back, Delaney and I, my wife, are Christian people, and our faith is all we have, really, is in our eyes. And one of the first things we found,
especially at that moment,
and
when
we lost everything, because it brings into focus how fragile and how fleeting the things of this earth are. And one of the first things we found was a picture of Jesus in our yard that was not ours. It was from someone else's house. It washed into our yard. And that's where we drew our strength from. It's there's a lot of great services out there. There's Red Cross and all these other people that are trying to help. But it is an amazingly difficult thing to go through, whether you lose a house to any natural disaster, earthquake or fire or whatever. All of the things that you had are either gone and or damaged or that kind of thing. And it puts what's important into perspective, and that's your faith and your family and your friends.
Great. Paul, thank you so much for giving this frank discussion on things that were meaningful to you. Yeah. So this is Paul, and I'm Rob, and thank you for watching this segment of Preparing Your Home for the Hurricane.